Good evening and welcome. I want to thank you for attending. I'm Michaela Curtis. Here with me tonight is Melissa Sargent and Crystal Ellison. So a little bit about me. I'm the president / founder of Just Be. I have an extensive past in mental health recovery, which includes prior work on my own, work with another mental health recovery nonprofit in Monroe, Michigan, completing my mental health first aid responder certification, among other certifications from nonprofitready.com. And I have worked on my own mental health recovery with a diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder with psychotic features. And that has been for the past 16 years. Sounds scary, I know. Probably makes you a little uncomfortable. And for those of you who know me, who kind of know me, you may be having a little disbelief or shock. I get it. I see it all the time, the responses from people, which is actually what we're going to talk about today. How we respond, how we react, or how we don't. Now, let me introduce you to Melissa Sargent. Melissa, please take a minute to tell us about yourself.
I was gonna bring up my bio, but my phone just died. I didn't add that to there, so hold on 1 second. Sorry. Promise I won't do this during that. So, hold on. Can I bring it up on here? Oh, it's on here. Okay. I promise I won't do this.
You're fine.
Not a tablet. I have to have it this way, like this angle for the Zoom. So then it sucks trying to type while I'm
Right, while you're on.
moving.
Why don't I just pretend like I'm reading it? See, I wanted to have it on this so I could read it, but because I don't have it on this, so give me.
Just go ahead and read it.
All right, so I'm just gonna read this what I wrote, but this
Okay.
isn't how it's normally.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'm a female veteran with a fairly recent diagnosis of what's called CPTSD, and I suffer from both OCD and ADHD, all symptomatic from my PTSD. Newly single mother to a 3-year-old little boy who this last year met the criteria for autism. Honestly, no bullshit. Don't mind the sailor talk. Life has dealt me some nasty cards, but I found purpose in sharing my own mental health recovery with others. Upon being honorably discharged from the United States Navy in 2013, I attended Ferris State University and graduated with a bachelor's degree of science in criminal justice. Shortly after, I was hired as a probation officer for the First District Court and spent the last 2.5 years supervising many on my caseload. It is my hope to continue spreading awareness to those whom have endured massive amounts of trauma, have been diagnosed with a mental illness, or suffer with a substance abuse co-diagnosis issues. I leave you with the final stages of healing is using what happens to you to help others.
All right, and lastly, to introduce Crystal Ellison. Crystal, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Crystal Ellison. I've covered various college courses covering social work, psychology, and education. For the last 9 years, I've advocated for my special needs son, and I'm currently working for Be Positive to help others with their emotions.
All right, thank you, Crystal. If anyone has any questions, we will be holding a Q&A at the end of the webinar. Feel free to use the chat box and we'll answer any questions then. Now, to dive into it, first, we are going to learn a little bit about mental health, about some of the common diagnoses that you might see, those signs and symptoms of someone who may be unwell or in a crisis. And finally, we are going to talk about how you can help them. This is going to help you become more comfortable in uncomfortable situations where you might not have known how to respond before. It'll build your confidence, and most importantly, it will allow you to provide your loved one, your friend, or even your acquaintance with the help that they need. So first things first, what is mental health? What do you think of when I say that? Ultimately, as defined by the World Health Organization, it is a state of well-being where a person realizes their own abilities, they can cope with normal stresses of life, they can work productively, and contribute to their community.
We all
We all
have
have mental health. We
just
just may have different or varying degrees of it. You may have great mental health, yet your friend, neighbor, or family may have poor mental health. There are plenty of things we can do to try and maintain or achieve good mental health. But mental illness does not discriminate, and if it is left untreated, sometimes despite our best efforts of self-care, we may need treatment from professionals, which, believe it or not, getting and following treatment is a practice to achieving good mental health.
One thing that I would like to talk about is when someone is in a mental health crisis. Depending on the situation, a mental health crisis can change a person's behavior very drastically. They may be erratic, not making sense, delusional. Sometimes they can turn violent. It can be very scary dealing with someone in a crisis. This is when it is very crucial to try and get them help. I have seen it time and time again, though, where many people witness someone in crisis and they don't do anything, or they brush it off by making fun of the person, calling them crazy, or saying they're on drugs.
Very good point, Crystal. And we try to fight that stigma that is attached with mental illness. I'm sure most of you are here because you want to end the stigma. Well, with that, this brings us to the first step. Let's change the conversation. From now on, when we witness someone in crisis, educate those around that person who may be saying insensitive things, or those who are just making assumptions about their state of mind.
I'd also like to add that while our ultimate goal is to help someone in crisis, we never want to put our own safety at risk. If someone is displaying violent, unagreeable behavior, it is best to let the courts or law handle them. There are steps that we can take to do this that we will talk about later.
Thank you, Crystal. So moving forward, there are many different mental health disorders that we could talk about. We went ahead and chose the top 5 most common disorders to
It
review.
should be 4.
Top 4.
Top 4.
Top 4 most common disorders to review with you. And hope that you can learn a little bit more about each one and understand some of the signs and symptoms of them. So the first one is depression. This is a loss of interest in things you like. Or should I say the symptoms are?
However,
Symptoms exuberant and loss of interest in things you like, low energy, trouble with sleep, too much or too little, difficulty eating, weight changes, suicidal thoughts. We go on to our second one, our second most common disorder, which is anxiety, which is you can see things such as panic, restlessness, difficulty concentrating, rapid heart rate and breathing, insomnia. Our third most common is PTSD, which includes flashbacks, nightmares, restlessness, memory suppression, triggers. And our fourth most common mental disorder is bipolar, which includes mood swings, depression, mania, sleep issues.
all right. Thank you, Melissa. Hopefully you have a better understanding after that and you feel knowledgeable enough to be able to recognize signs and symptoms. Now I want to talk about what comes next, getting them help. There's so many resources out there. You just have to know where to look. But that brings up the next big question. If there is so much help out there, why aren't people getting the help they need? When it comes to getting help, there are many reasons why people do not. As many as there are resources out there, I could fill in an entire presentation on why people don't get help. But we took the top reasons and compiled them for you here. These are the most common. The first being, they just do not know where to get help. They don't know where to start, and that can be discouraging. Do they need to go to a psychiatrist, a therapist, their primary care doctor? Do they need a referral? I don't know about I don't know if any of you have ever struggled with your mental health, but I know personally, whenever I have, even the smallest task can feel overwhelming. Now imagine trying to navigate this on your own. Talk about overwhelming. Therefore, one thing we can do to help people who may not know where to start is just to help guide them. Take the time and help them figure this out. Send them phone numbers or brochures. Send them our way, and we can help get the process started. And as a side note, a good place to start is their primary care doctor. Most of the time, they can help, and if they can't, they will refer them to a doctor who can.
Can I interrupt you with this part? I meant
Yeah.
to bring this to your attention. When you say send them our way,
Mhm.
I would be careful with
Yeah.
saying that because that would mean that we would do the full steps with them to get.
So should we take that out?
I
Exclude
would
that?
reword that somehow because you don't want somebody to come with us with a need like Katie and there be nothing
Okay.
that
We can do.
we can do. And we don't want to put ourselves in that type of
Okay.
position.
Send our way. I'll just strike that. Okay.
And then phone numbers for shoes. Okay. The other thing I was gonna say, I know you originally said 5. I'm wondering if we should include like schizophrenia and psychosis.
Do you want
Okay.
to, Marcia?
Because I feel like that's also something that I think that's actually one of the scariest mental illnesses that people are
Okay.
part of.
I'll add it.
I just think that would be important one to put there.
Add to slideshow. Okay.
So that's just my
I'm
opinion.
gonna send you the slideshow too, so you can go over the symptoms and stuff.
Yeah.
So that
I know what
so
it-
that you know.
and I'll probably like be able to word that differently. but I
Yeah,
just-
and then you can like talk about them a little bit too if you want to.
Mhm.
Just not all of them, you don't have to.
Right.
You know, a few of them. Okay. You're up.
Another issue is that people feel they just don't have the time to devote to getting the help they need. I mean, how many of you are parents? How many of you work full time? How many of you both? I bet you are booked up. Our normal day-to-day activities take time and no one wants to take time out of their day to go sit in a doctor's office for 3 hours. So they don't. They don't take the time out for themselves because they are too busy taking care of everyone else. Then there are also privacy concerns. They don't want anyone to find out that they are getting mental health care because of that stigma that that comes along with it. They don't worry that their friends or family will think differently of them or that their boss will fire them. They don't want that judgment. And based off what we see in the media, what we see online, and what we see in our own lives, can you blame them? This is where changing the conversation becomes very important and showing your support. If you can show that that you are not going to judge someone for the decision to seek care, that could mean the world to them and it could change their entire outlook of getting help.
So those are great points, but we also must talk about those human behavior and personality traits that involve stubbornness or denial. There's some very stubborn people out there who in general just think they can handle any mental health challenge on their own, that they don't need treatment or help. Now, you will see a lot of this in the older generations because you have to realize when they were growing up, you didn't get help. You didn't talk about your issues. So today's concept of therapy and medication is all very orthodox to them. Granted, there are members of the younger crowd who can be just as stubborn. I would honestly consider myself one of them. I always hated the idea of relying on medication to make myself well. But you know what? Sometimes you need to do that, and there's no shame in it. Then we get into the denial aspect of it, where someone does not want to even acknowledge that they may be experiencing a mental health crisis. These can be tricky to navigate because they tend to cut ties with anyone who suggests they need help. These are hard, and usually, if they get bad enough, you may end up having to get the law involved and get them hospitalized against their will. These are really hard situations because unless you can convince them they need help, they're not going to willingly seek any.
Just to put things into perspective for you guys of how common mental health disorders are, I want you to keep in mind that 1 in every 5 people will at some time in their life experience a mental health issue. 1 in 5, I guarantee everyone here knows more than 5 people. This is something to think about. Another issue that really caught I think I should say our attention, not mine. Sorry. Our attention was the fact that last year in 2020, 1.4 million people attempted to end their lives. 1.4 million. To me, that is just people screaming for help and not getting it. We must do better. We have to help. We have to talk about it. We have to make the conversations normal and comfortable, or we're going to keep seeing numbers like those and things are not going to improve. Again, mental illness does not discriminate. It doesn't care who you are, how old you are, or what your profession is. It can come at any time in your life as well. There basically are no rules. No one is excluded from possibly suffering from a mental health issue. You would think with those facts alone, we would all be a little bit more open to talking about these things.
Sadly, there's so many. I think this is supposed to be the next slide.
Is that-
Right next slide.
Yep.
That we,
Next slide. I must have missed that one. I'm so glad we're doing this. Sadly, there's so many awkward conversations that people have when they're faced with someone being remotely honest with how they feel or what they are experiencing. I've heard many responses of, oh, okay, or oh, sorry, or even why. None of these show care. None of these responses show support. We need to work on how we respond. Instead of an okay or sorry, why don't we follow that up with a what can I do for you? How can I help you? Have you thought about reaching out for help? There are many different responses we can use to make the conversation less awkward and also make the person feel safe and supported. Can you imagine how hard it is just to open up and actually tell someone that you're struggling? I know I have had these conversations before, right, with Melissa here, and she helped me get the resources that I needed to get better. So remember, even if you feel the conversation is awkward, you have to remember that if someone is struggling and reaching out for help, it is no longer about you and how you feel. It's only about them and getting them set up with the resources that they need to get well. We have to serve as a bridge for them, a bridge to resources.
Plus, can we incorporate? The only reason I'm saying this is because this slide that I was talking about actually is one of the let's talk about mental health that I did post to you guys about 2020 alone, about the numbers. Can we play that video before my slide?
That's a really good idea.
Send me that specific video.
And I know what one it is. It's the 2021 about how this is actually
First.
an epidemic pandemic, or that itself is a pandemic on
Yep.
top of it being a pandemic. Do you know what I'm talking about?
And that's before you, yeah. that's
Before we go into that slide.
Before slide
I
7.
think that would just be
I'll put it on a slide and play it, and then we can
Okay.
go to the next one.
awesome.
Okay, send it to me, which one you want. Okay. Remember, someone in a mental health crisis is no different than someone suffering from a broken arm. They deserve care and support.
We can provide that by being a listening ear. A lot of times, people just need to feel heard or they need to vent. By listening, we can allow them the safe, non-judgmental space to do that.
We can also help by being that bridge to resources for them. At the end of the webinar, we are going to send each one of you a wellness toolkit that has a list of resources in it with numbers you should store in your phone because you never know who may need it.
Working to educate the public is another way to help. You'd be surprised how far being comfortable talking about mental health can take you. You may open the doors to helping someone who may have never reached out to you before you were comfortable speaking about it. Or it's just correcting that person speaking insensitively about mental health.
Can we pause the recording for a second? So for this slide for part 9, I did not do yet because there's so much. And I want to make sure that when we do that part, I think we did great, you guys. I definitely have to learn to talk slower.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I want to open up for questions now, if anyone has any. Question. We've got a million questions.
How do you learn to talk slowly?
Breathe. Okay. Thank you again. And please reach out if you're interested in more information or for information on how you can help our cause. We appreciate each and every one of you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Night.
Thank you.